thank the delegation for being here as well. This is going to be an important conversation that we're having here today. I want to begin just by saying I was asked by the President, Joe Biden, back in January if I would consider being, if I'd be Labor Secretary of the United States of America. And for me, I said yes. I didn't say yes right away. I said to him, I thanked him, and at the end of the conversation, he said, "Marty, you didn't accept." And I said, "Of course, Mr. President, I'll do it." And over the last few months, before I got sworn in, I thought about my journey to that place, which I do a lot in my life. And I thought about how I got to where being called by the President of the United States to be Secretary of Labor. And I grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, in Boston, neighborhood in Boston. My parents are immigrants from Ireland. My father came out in 1956 to this country. My mother came out in 1959. They met here. When my father came out here, he joined the Laborers Union, Local 223 in Boston. My uncle Pat came out a couple years later and joined the Laborers Union. And in the house that I grew up in, we talked about labor all the time. We talked about people being unemployed, talked about people getting jobs, people trying people not to get hurt, representing people. My uncle became the business manager of that local union. And from a very young age, I just loved the idea of the labor movement. I loved the idea of just helping people because that was the house I grew up in. I worked construction one summer on a construction site. And then a couple of years later, I joined the Laborers Union on June 30th, 1988. I became a member of that local union. And I thought that union gave my family everything. That union put a roof over our head. That union provided health benefits to my family when I was a kid. I was sick with cancer, paid health benefits. That union provided comfort, security. When my father retired, that union provided a pension. That union now provides a pension for my mother. My dad passed away a few years ago. I had the opportunity to run for state representative in 1997. That union gave me the opportunity to run for state representative. I ran the building trades for a couple of years. And then I ran for mayor of Boston in 2013. That union gave me the opportunity, the labor movement, I really should say, by that point, gave me the opportunity to be able to do what I do. And I see the benefits of the labor movement in this country. We have an administration in Washington, quite honestly, that is simply amazing. We had a meeting right before this meeting. I'm not going to embarrass the Vice President, but we started talking about what we're doing on our task force. And she was asking questions as if she was a labor organizer. And she jumped into the middle of this. We have a unique opportunity at this moment in time to do some amazing things with an amazing administration. I'm not saying because I work for this administration, but I'm saying because they're not afraid to say the word union. They're not afraid to say the word collective bargaining. They're not afraid to say the word workers' rights. They're not afraid to be out there fighting for people. They certainly understand the importance of the labor movement and making sure that to build the middle class, we need to build a good, strong labor movement. The Fight for 15. You sure? Is it Fight for 15?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. We need to build a strong labor movement to support that fight. And this administration has put forth some important pieces of legislation moving in front of us. One is raising the minimum wage in the country to $15 an hour. Another one's the PRO Act. Another one's the American Families Plan, American Rescue Plan, American Jobs Plan. All three of those plans intertwined in it are labor rights for people. And then the President and the Vice President put together a task force on worker empowerment. And I got a call one day, and I was asked, would you co-chair a worker empowerment task force? And I thought to myself, I'm the Secretary of Labor. I'm co-chairing a task force. Why aren't I chairing the task force? And the next breath was the Vice President of the United States of America is chairing the task force. I said, okay, I get it now. And the task force is made up of, I'm going to wrap up here in a second. The task force is made up of cabinet. The first time in the history of the country that a president and a vice president put together a task force made up specifically of cabinet members to talk about empowering workers. Think about that for a minute. Those of you in this room that have been in this labor movement for a long time, think about that. You've never seen this in the history of the labor movement. And for folks that are here younger at the table, this has never happened. So let's make the best of it and the most of it. So I just want to say I'm so honored to be here today. I was given a whole bunch of notes to talk off of. I didn't look at my notes once, so I missed a whole bunch of things. But I'll come back to that later on. And I'm going to just introduce to you the Vice President of the United States of America. I met the Vice President probably about 3 years ago. She was a senator I saw on TV. She was having a question and answer with somebody in front of her, and I wanted to meet with her, and I went and met with her way back before she was running for president. And from that moment, I said, this woman is something. She's a leader, a true-born leader, and I'm so grateful to serve with her on this task force, and I'm so honored and grateful that she's the Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Secretary Walsh. I was so excited when you said you would be the Labor Secretary because, you know, we have a defined amount of time to do the work that we need to get done. And this is not a time to be incremental. There's too much at stake, in particular when we're talking about America's working families and the dignity of work and the significance and the value of recognizing the value and the significance of the work being done. And so this is my partner in this effort, and I want to thank you in front of everyone and all the friends, Secretary, for the work that you are doing. I want to recognize we have Senator Bob Casey. He and I served in the United States Senate together during my 4 years there. I've said this before, and the reality is that Bob Casey is exactly who he is, whether the cameras are on or off, and including when we have been in those caucus meetings, and he's always the one to stand up and talk about workers' rights, working families, and always holding up the standard of what we should all care about in terms of the folks who are making this country run. I want to give special recognition to Congressman Connor Lamb. He is just a rock star in the U.S. Congress. He is chairing the Congressional Steel Caucus, and which is all about strengthening industry and good union jobs. He has been a fighter for working people, and the President and I are so excited to work with him and to continue our partnership around his leadership for working families in Pennsylvania. So thank you, Congressman, for being here, and to everyone else. So look, it is great to be in the House of Labor. And this town in particular, Pittsburgh, has been a leader among leaders on the issue of working people in America. I was just looking up my history. In 1881 was the founding meeting of the AFL in Pittsburgh, 1881. Almost 100 years later, 1983, the founding convention of the CIO right here in Pittsburgh. So this, in many places, in many ways, is part of the birthplace of America's leadership in saying that if you want to have a strong economy, support workers and recognize the dignity of work. And I will say, as I say all the time, no matter what your profession, if you are a member of organized labor of a union or not, thank unions every day for the 5-day work week, for the weekend, for paid leave if you've got it. We still got work to do there. Family leave, vacation time. Thank unions for all of those benefits, because it is the men and women of organized labor, of our unions, who have fought for all workers, including their membership. So I'm here to thank you all on behalf of the President and myself, and then to rededicate ourselves to the work we need to get done. And in particular, we created the White House Task Force on Worker Organizing and Empowerment, and the President has asked the Secretary and I to lead that, and it is in many ways about addressing not only what we must do to reinforce the right of collective bargaining, card check issues like that, but also what we need to do to address the barriers that stand in the way of workers organizing. Because there are still so many, and you all know that, which is why we're going to have this conversation today. So-called right-to-work laws, employer intimidation, which we hear about sometimes on the television and on the nightly news, and sometimes and often we don't hear about it, but you all do, and so we got to talk about that. Barriers in terms of a tax on card check. And our administration feels very strongly that there is no issue that we can take on that is too small or too big to do what we must do to remove the barriers to workers having the ability, the true, real ability, to join a union and to organize. The American Rescue Plan was a fight against many of these barriers by our administration, one of the first issues that we took on, and thanks to organized labor and many others, we got it passed. The American Rescue Plan, as the President will talk about, is unabashedly pro-union. We are very proud that our administration will probably be the most pro-union of any we've seen before. So in the American Rescue Plan, we put in $350 billion for states and cities and towns to help protect public sector jobs, which we remember have been under threat of at least reducing the numbers, if not getting rid of some of them altogether. In that plan, we got $170 billion in funding for schools to get schools reopened safely, but to also protect and support our teachers and our educators throughout the educational system. So it's the teachers, it's the school bus drivers, it's cafeteria workers, all of the folks who are part of making education real in our country. Nearly $31 billion went to funding for transit systems. Of course, let's talk there about the essential work, especially highlighted during the pandemic, of our transit workers, who every day drove people around, perfect strangers, risking their own safety and the safety of their families because of their dedication to their work and their understanding about the essential nature of that work. So none of this could have happened without unions, and I'm here to say thank you again for the work you've done. And then we have two more plans that we're fighting for: the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. The American Jobs Plan would do a number of things that will be about fortifying and growing good union jobs. It's about infrastructure, right? The infrastructure that includes roads and bridges, yes. The infrastructure that includes cleaning pipes so that our children are not drinking lead and being exposed to the toxic substances that can have lifelong impact on their ability to learn and live. It's about investing in apprenticeships. So part of the American Jobs Plan dedicates resources to the kinds of apprenticeship programs that IBEW and so many others have made the hallmark of what it means to invest in America's workforce with the skills and the techniques that are necessary to build our country. We would expand access to long-term care services under Medicaid. So that's about, again, supporting workers and supporting healthcare workers and supporting domestic workers and supporting home health care workers and supporting child care workers, all who are part of the infrastructure of our country. Because, you know, the way I think about infrastructure is this. You want to define infrastructure? I define it this way: whatever you need to get where you need to go. And if you need to go to work, but you need someone to take care of your children, then child care becomes essential infrastructure from my perspective. So this is some of the work that we are doing. And then, of course, supporting the PRO Act, as the Secretary has said. The American Families Plan. That would make it, again, possible for Americans to get to work by providing much-needed services. So universal pre-K, looking at the fact that our 3- and 4-year-olds, when they have access and their families have access to universal pre-K, that's about not daycare, it's about education, getting them started off as young as possible on a track where we see that if they are on that track, they are much more likely to graduate high school and go on. 2 years of free community college, same point. And then, of course, a historic investment in child care by increasing pay and expanding training for child care workers. So all of that to say that when we think about unions, when we think about the need to support workers' ability to organize and collective bargain, it is about understanding the significance between that and the desire that families have to raise their families and support their households, so that not only they can enjoy a certain quality of life, but so we can be productive as a nation. When we support unions, that's about lifting up the middle class, and everybody in America benefits. And as the President and I, you know, on a daily basis, we get what's called the Presidential Daily Brief, the PDB, where we get classified information about the threats to our national security and hotspots around the world. You know, one of the things that we think about is the need for America to be competitive, for us to understand that we have to maintain our economic strength in addition to fighting always for our democracy. And if we are going to be strong as an economy, we have to support our workers and make sure they are strong. And that is at its essence the reason we do the work we do. So with that, I look forward to our conversation. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. I just want to give a shout out to Local 5. Thank you for hosting us today in your Union Hall today. Appreciate that. We're going to open up now to have just a conversation about what we're doing, questions for you, questions for us, and to kind of lead it off. I don't know if you want me to start with a question.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I would say, if the labor movement could do more as a movement, what are the one or two things that appeal to a new audience of workers? What would they do? So when you're out there talking to people, what do you think the best thing the labor movement does and what we should be doing?
Hi, I'm Mariana Padias from the Steelworkers. I think in terms of what the labor movement needs to be doing is to really take advantage of the new generation of workers out there that haven't been raised in union households. I think we all know that union density is as low as it's ever been, which means generations of people coming up not like you did, right? Like they didn't grow up in a household where that you talk about at the kitchen table, you talk about unemployment, and you learn how your job is actually provide security for your family. And so I think the labor movement can do a better job in terms of educating people. And I think the government can support that in that it's, the official policy of the federal government is to encourage collective bargaining. Mm-hmm. And so I want to thank the administration for everything they're doing to uphold the workers' rights, and there is a lot more to do.
No, I agree with the education piece. What else do you think we need to do when you're out talking to people?
And let me just add to the point that you made. The union membership dropped by almost 15% between, I think it was like 1979 and 2020. And you saw that American workers, whether they be union or non-union, lost about $200 billion a year as a result of that. There's a direct correlation. Absolutely. Such an important point.
Hi, I'm Jen Chow. I'm representing the Mapbox Workers Union, organized by CWA, and I actually joined the union my third week on the job. So as a millennial coming up, it was really hard because I never really knew about unions. My mom worked for the school district. My dad was an independent contractor. So I think for me personally was honestly like people see tech as a privilege. We're coming in, we're typically people in San Francisco. I was like, oh, am I going to wear my Patagonia that's branded today to like look like a tech worker? And one thing that really got me involved was hearing the stories from my coworkers, hearing about a coworker in San Francisco who's making $80,000 as an engineer. That is ridiculous. I have a coworker who's a higher level above me, and they make less than I do, which is completely unfair. The inequality is really big. So being able to share that around, Vice President Harris, I'm from California. I know you support tech workers and what we're doing. So I think really just hearing from you all directly. We actually started a TikTok and we have a Twitter. So if you could retweet us and talk about us and share how you're supporting us. We announced last week, and we're honestly scared. Like, I couldn't tell my bosses I was here today because of fear of retaliation and hearing that directly. So just whatever you all can do to support us, we will blast that message out directly to the employees, all 650 of us.
Can you talk for a minute about the kind of intimidation that you're hearing about?
Oh, absolutely. So we actually announced last Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and we have not heard a peep from our leadership. We know they hired an anti-union buster law firm, and they have been in all-hands war rooms all through last week. We had Juneteenth off, and we actually saw that our entire leadership isn't talking to us. Some of my direct bosses have been very supportive. However, it's been really difficult to not hear from our CEO, our CSO, even our HR leadership that we have protection. We have over 66% of public support across every available participant and over 70% privately. And that percentage is because people are afraid to go public. We have brand new people who would love to support the union, understand the inequality we have across teams, across different states. However, we're just afraid that our leadership is going to come at us. Maybe they can't fire us directly, but they can make it a very unsafe place to work in the point where we feel alienated for what we're doing, or because I'm on the organizing committee, I feel that my coworkers won't support me in being here today. I was afraid to tell my coworkers that I was coming from California to Pittsburgh to talk about this with you directly. So I think just any open communication you can support us would be very helpful in this fight.
So you were very new, and you decided to join and to actually work on coordinating. Why did you, what prompted you, back to the earlier question, what touched you that made you decide you were going to take that leap and do that?
Hearing that my coworker made $40,000 more than I did because they worked in San Francisco and was a man, that 100%. I'm a first-generation college student. I left the government because I couldn't afford to pay my student loans, and
You're very courageous. You're very courageous.
being here, hearing that as a first generation, my mom's a single parent, that I made less than my coworkers do because they're white males and they went to Stanford or Berkeley. It doesn't make me less than them. I am just as good as they are.
That's right. That's right.
Jen, I want to thank you for sharing your story. When you think about where we are in our country, that people are afraid to collectively join a union if they choose, collectively afraid of the ramifications of that. I come out of the building trades, so it's a little different sometimes because they like to, we like to be able to just say what we want to say and fight back a little bit. When you think about that, that's just wrong. We live in the United States of America. And one of the things that, I'm grateful for this administration is the fact that both the president and the vice president have been so open about somebody's right to join the union. If they choose to join the union, we should be able to do that. And if you choose not to join the union, that's your right. And it should be done freely. And that's why the legislation that's been put in front of Congress, the PRO Act, is such an important piece of legislation, but it's also important to talk about the right for people's ability to collectively bargain. And I think that that's one thing that is very different that's going on in this country right now. And I think public opinion is starting to sway towards people's ability to be able to join a union if they want to join a union. Let me just throw kind of an open question on the table. Just about what you see, anybody at the table, including you, Jen, and you've told us a little bit, of complications, obstacles that you see in your industries as far as the right to be able to organize. And I know you all see them in different ways. I'd like to throw it out there just for a conversation. I know SEIU sees them. I know the building trade sees them. I know that some of the other unions, steelworkers, see them. I know that the other unions at the table see them. So just kind of throw it out there for a question.
And I just add, what do we know about when people are reluctant to join? What do they state as their reasons for their reluctance?
I'm happy to jump in. Barbara Rosenthal from the Surface Employees International Union. I just wanted to say to Jen and to every single worker, we have your back. Every single worker that's fighting for the union together is in the same fight, and we've got your back. To your question, in terms of what workers are up against, I just want to make sure I'm answering correctly here to what you're naming. In the service and care industry, I just want to also commend the administration and leadership in this room for leaning into infrastructure and service and care jobs. And if we're going to think about the next generation of a labor movement, we have to think about service and care jobs that have been frankly written out and ignored and don't have ways to organize, from home care to frankly fast food, a disaggregated industry where multinational corporations get to hide behind joint employer rules. It's not acceptable that workers like a Miss Ruiz in San Jose, California, a 16-year McDonald's employee, has to strike during the pandemic to get cleaning supplies, and that the corporation then just shuts down the site and moves on. It's not acceptable that, frankly, big corporations like UPMC right here in Pittsburgh, enormous, it's a multi-billion-dollar health system where a nursing assistant has to pay for their education, has to figure out how to pay for their child care and navigate their job, and gets retaliated against. And that to build power in that industry, it can't just be one hospital at a time. It has to be the entire system, has to be able to have power and be able to bargain with a multi-billion-dollar company like that in the way that the steel workers and auto workers did. We have to think about not just the rules that we have to address and adjust, but frankly create the ones that create conditions for workers who have never been able to bargain with their employers to set standards, like in fast food, in healthcare, and many others. And so those are some of the, I hope I got there, and again, to your question. And then Vice President Harris, I want to make sure I answered yours, so if you don't mind repeating it, so I.
Just one, when you are organizing, what do individuals say is their concern for joining a union?
I actually don't think people are concerned about joining. The majority of people want to. They're terrified of losing their job, of being able to manage, to be able to survive on one or two jobs, frankly, the risk of that with their employers. But they also know that when they frankly can come together, there's incredible strength. And there's so much courage, and that it really, literally is that the rules are favoring corporations in a way that is just unacceptable. And that the labor law, while we should fix labor law, we also have to hold corporations responsible for building this country back better, and that is creating plans that include workers at the table. So every ounce of public dollar, every way in which corporations want to figure out how to get a tax break or get a grant, any number of things should be attached to how they have workers at the table and good family-sustaining jobs, and the way that the administration and leadership here are thinking about care as infrastructure, and that's what. But people want the union; they're just terrified.
What I see, I'm from the building trades, so intimidation is real,
Yeah.
and there is that fear of joining a union because employees